Imagine you're in the middle of a dungeon crawl, and suddenly a mustachioed hero with overalls and a fire flower shows up. Yep, we're making Mario in D&D. And it actually works. I've built him before, but D&D's got some updates and so do I. So let's go ahead and start off with the species. You could go with a human, but that's way too boring. He's shorter than the average human, and he's got some iconic facial hair. So I'm going to go with a dwarf. The newer dwarfs that got updated in 2024 don't have a reduction in speed, which is great because that was a huge pain in the butt whenever I played as one. So their normal movement speed is 30 feet, just like everybody else. They also have the feature Dwarven Resilience. So they have resistance to poison damage, and they have advantage on saving throws to avoid or end the poisoned condition. You also get Stone Cutting, so you're pretty good at dealing with stones, and you have Tremor Sense, but that's probably from dealing with so many thwomps over the years. Just to make sure you can take more than one hit, just like every Mario since Mario 64, you also get the feature Dwarven Toughness. So your hit point maximum is increased by 1, and you get an extra 1 HP every time you level up. The hardest choice was actually choosing a background. I was tempted to go with something like Artisan to lean into being a plumber, but plumbing isn't necessarily an artisan skill, and it doesn't fit super well. But between Super Mario Galaxy and everything he does in Super Mario Odyssey, going between different worlds, which basically happens in every game, he just happens to use a pipe to do it, all the jumping around different worlds feels more like a wild spacer, so that's what I'm going to go with. This gives you skill proficiencies in athletics and survival, as well as navigator's tools and the ability to use space vehicles. We needed some sort of vehicles in there just for Mario Kart either way. It also gives us wild space adaptation, which can give us the tough feat. So we get an extra 2 hit points of health per level of our overall build. So already from the start, we have an extra 3 hit points for every level of our build, making us much more survivable. Then when it comes to the class, I want to build Mario in order of his abilities and the most important and prevalent power-ups. Outside of a few power-ups and Super Mario RPG where he uses a hammer, most of the time he's just punching, kicking, and butt stomping. So we're going to go with a monk. And I know I started off my original Mario build the same way, but don't worry, it's definitely going to be a bit different. Becoming a monk gives you martial arts. So you have proficiency with simple and martial weapons as long as those martial weapons have the light property, and you get bonuses to unarmed strikes. So you can now make an unarmed strike as a bonus action every single turn if you want to, and you get access to martial arts die. So you can replace any of your monk weapon damage or any of your unarmed strike damage with a 1d6 in place of its normal damage. And that 1d6 upgrades to larger and larger dice as you level up. You also get the feature Dexterous Attack. So you can use your dexterity modifier for all of your attack and damage rolls for both unarmed strikes and any monk weapons. And since we do have access to 2 attacks already, that's going to help mitigate the drawback that we're going to have to do some multiclassing, which will slightly delay us getting an extra attack as early as other characters. Also at first level of monk, you get access to unarmored defense. So your armor class, when you're not wearing any armor or a shield, equals 10 plus your dexterity modifier plus your wisdom modifier. Second level of monk gives you monk's focus. And this is very important because before Mario was Mario, he was Jumpman, and we needed a way to sort out jumping. And Monk's Focus is going to help us with that. So you have a number of focus points equal to your level in Monk. And you can use them for things like spending 1 point for Flurry of Blows. So instead of just making 1 unarmed strike as a bonus action, you can make 2 Patient Defense. So you can always take the disengage action as a bonus action or spend 1 focus point to take the disengage and dodge action as a bonus action. But most importantly, to be a little more true to being Jumpman in your history, you have access to Step of the Wind. So you can always take the dash action as a bonus action, and you can spend 1 focus point to take the disengage and dash action as a bonus action, and your jump distance is doubled for the turn. But you do get 2 more abilities from being a monk at 2nd level. First one is unarmored movement. So your movement speed while you're not wearing any armor is boosted by 10 feet. And that goes up as you level up in Monk as well. The last thing you get at 2nd level of Monk is Uncanny Metabolism. So when you roll initiative, you can regain all expended focus points, and when you do so, you get to roll a martial arts die and regain a number of hit points equal to your Monk level, plus the number you rolled. But once you use this feature, you can't use it again until you finish a long rest. Then before we dive into any Monk subclasses, I need to make sure I get one very important power-up from Mario. So I'm going to tell you what that is when we get there. But I need to do the multiclass first, and we're going to multiclass into fighter. But I should note, you can take these levels in any order you want. I would just recommend starting with monk, but in the path to the overall finished product, it really doesn't matter that much. When you multiclass into fighter, at first level you get a fighting style. And the issue with fighting styles is that pretty much every single one of them revolves around weapons or armor, and we don't want to deal with that because we have so much monk stuff. But whenever I'm playing any Mario game, there's one thing that I hate even more than any possible water level, and that's dealing with any level where I have limited visibility because of some weird darkness mechanic. So in order to mitigate my own frustrations in certain Mario levels, we're going to grab the fighting style blind fighting. So you have blind sight within a range of 10 feet. Also at first level of fighter, you get second wind, just leaning into you having an extra life or an extra item that you can use to make sure you can take an extra hit. Because second wind allows you to use a bonus action to regain hit points equal to 1d10 plus your fighter level. You can use this feature twice after the 2024 update, and you regain one expended use when you finish a short rest, and you regain all uses when you finish a long rest. And when you reach certain levels in fighter, you get additional uses of this. The last thing you get at first level of fighter is a weapon mastery. And because one of the main weapons that Mario might use from time to time is a hammer, we are limited in using a hammer that would be at least light or a simple weapon version of a hammer. So we're going to grab a light hammer, and that's the only hammer we're going to worry about. The fact that it upgrades in damage die thanks to our monk martial arts stuff gives us the opportunity to play up that it's a larger hammer even if it's not. The weapon mastery in the light hammer gives us the Nick weapon mastery feature. So when you make an extra attack of the light property, you can make it as part of the attack action instead of as a bonus action. Because if you're dual wielding, you usually have to use your bonus action for your offhand attack, but thanks to the Nick weapon mastery feature, you can make it as part of your attack action. And that is especially helpful as a monk because you can use your bonus action for so many things. So that means now you can make 2 attacks as your main action if you're attacking with light hammers. And you can still use your bonus action for unarmed strikes or other monk stuff. So even though we're still only level 3 overall, we have access to 4 attacks in a single turn, between dual wielding with the Nick feature and flurry of blows. And an additional benefit of having light hammers being what we're specializing in means that they have a thrown property, which fits pretty well with you taking on the abilities of the hammer bros. Then at second level of fighter, you get action surge, so you can take 2 actions in a single turn, once per short or long rest. Second level of fighter also gives you tactical mind, so instead of using your second wind to heal yourself, you can use it to gain 1d10 to add to a skill check. If you still fail the skill check, you don't use up any of your second wind feature. Then at third level of fighter, it's time to choose a fighter subclass. And I needed to make sure I got one of the most iconic Super Mario power-ups as early as I could. Granted, I could have done this with certain spells or other random ways, but I kind of liked going this route because I'm gonna go with a Rune Knight because we need to get that mushroom. Rune Knights will give us proficiency with smith's tools, which is very fitting for a plumber because they essentially have to be a blacksmith to some degree. And when you choose to be a Rune Knight, you get the feature Rune Carver. And you can think of this as other random power-ups that might not be quite as iconic, but the whole reason I went with a Rune Knight because you get the feature Giant's Might, aka actually eating a mushroom to grow bigger, because Giant's Might allows you to use a bonus action to magically gain a few benefits. So if you're smaller than large, you become large, along with anything that you're wearing, which is the main feature I needed to focus on. That's the whole thing about eating a mushroom, it makes you bigger. But this feature will also give you advantage on strength checks and strength saving throws, and once on each of your turns when you attack with a weapon or an unarmed strike, you can deal an extra 1d6 damage. You can use this feature a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus per long rest. Then at 4th level of fighter, you get an ability score improvement, which we need to get as soon as possible because otherwise we're going to be falling behind. So this is our starting ability scores, and then we're going to throw 2 points into dexterity because that is the most important for being a monk, which we are now going to switch classes and go back over to monk. 3rd level of monk allows us to choose a monk subclass, and we need a bunch of other power-ups, and many of his power-ups are elemental focused. So we're going to go with a warrior of the elements. Whether you have a fire flower, a frost flower, or you're just slamming down so hard with your butt it lets out a thunderous boom, All of these can fit with a Warrior of the Elements, because it gives you the feature Elemental Attunement, so you can spend 1 focus point to charge yourself with elemental energy for 10 minutes. And this makes it so your unarmed strikes reach an extra 10 feet further away from you, as if you have a tiny bit of range like you would with a fire flower. And you can play up that elemental feature a bit more because invoking this elemental attunement gives you elemental strikes. So your unarmed strikes can deal acid, cold, fire, lightning, or thunder damage now. And when you hit a creature with one of these strikes while your elemental attunement is active, you can force that creature to make a strength saving throw. And on a failed save, that target is either pushed or pulled 10 feet. Lastly, when you choose this subclass, you also get the elementalism cantrip, but that doesn't really work that well. It's more for just setting the mood, setting a vibe. I've never really found a mechanical use for it. Then at 4th level of Monk, you get access to another ability score improvement, so let's go ahead and boost up our dexterity by 2 more points, maxing it out. Also at 4th level of Monk, you get slow fall, so you can take a reaction to reduce your fall damage. And considering how far I've fallen, especially in Mario 64, that's definitely pretty helpful, reducing your fall damage by an amount equal to 5 times your Monk level. Then at 5th level of Monk, you get extra attack. So now you can technically attack 3 times as your action, thanks to 2 attacks from your main attack and your extra attack, 1 more attack as your offhand attack with an hammer if you happen to have one. Then you can use Action Surge for another 2 attacks, bringing you to 5 total attacks. And then you can use Flurry of Blows for 2 more attacks, bringing you to 7 total attacks, which is something I didn't actually plan for. I just started realizing as I was recording that he has a bunch of attacks. So if you want to do that screw spin / tornado spin punch thing that he does ever since Mario 64, especially in Super Smash Bros., you have a very straightforward way to be able to pull that off. And that damage is also upgraded because at 5th level of Monk, you get access to a slightly stronger martial arts die, boosting it from a D6 to a D8. Also at 5th level of Monk, you get access to Stunning Strike, so when you attack with a Monk weapon or an unarmed strike, you can spend 1 focus point to attempt an unarmed strike, forcing your enemy to make a Constitution saving throw, and on a failed save, they have the stunned condition until the start of your next turn. But on a successful save, their speed is still halved, and the next attack roll against them is made at advantage. 6th level of Monk gives you Empowered Strikes, so your unarmed strikes can now deal force damage instead of all of the other options you now have. And 6th level also gives you Elemental Burst. And I thought of this as Mario's ultimate from Super Smash Bros., where he lets out a massive Fire Flower Blast. So you can spend 2 focus points to use a magic action to let out a massive elemental burst in a 20-foot radius sphere, anywhere within 120 feet of yourself. That damage type can be acid, cold, fire, lightning, or thunder, and everything in that sphere has to make a dexterity saving throw, otherwise they take 3 rolls of your martial arts die on a failed save, or half as much on a successful one. And lastly, at 6th level of Monk, your unarmored movement boosts from 10 feet to 15 feet. 7th level of Monk gives you access to evasion, so whenever you have to make a dexterity saving throw, you take half damage, and if you succeed on the saving throw, you take 0 damage instead. 8th level of Monk gives us another ability score improvement, so let's go ahead and spend that on a couple points in wisdom, because that's the only other thing we really need to worry about as a monk. 9th level of Monk gives us acrobatic movement, so now, thanks to your massive speed of being a monk, you can now run across vertical surfaces and across liquids, which fits pretty well for that ability in Super Mario Odyssey, where you get that one random flower that's like a rocket shooting off of you, which basically allows you to run across any surface. Then at 10th level of Monk, you get heightened focus. So any of the basic stuff you can spend focus points on gets upgraded. Like your Flurry of Blows now gets upgraded to 3 attacks as your bonus action. Your Patient Defense also gives you some temporary hit points. And your Step of the Wind allows you to bring somebody else for the run. So if you need to grab Princess Peach and take off running away from Bowser, you can do that. Also at 10th level of Monk, you get access to Self-Restoration. So you can remove the Charmed, Frightened, or Poisoned condition from yourself. And you don't need to worry about food or drink as much. Finally, the last thing at 10th level of Monk is your unarmored movement boost to a bonus 20 feet from 15 feet. Then 11th level of Monk gives us access to a slightly stronger martial arts die, upgrading from a D8 to a D10. And we get the feature Stride of the Elements. So when your elemental attunement is active, you have a flying speed and a swimming speed equal to whatever your movement speed is at this point, which is super helpful for a ton of power-ups, because now we can deal with every water level that happens in Super Mario, and we have power-ups like the Tanuki suit or the superhero cape for that flying speed. Then finally, While we're here, we'll go ahead and grab one more ability score improvement at 12th level of Monk, throwing 2 more points into Wisdom and maxing it out. Now we have most of what we need from the core power-ups, between some basic flight, dealing with water levels, all of the elemental stuff we can do with fire flowers and frost flowers, but we need a bit more enhancement in a few different areas. So we're going to do one more multiclassing into Druid. When you become a Druid, you get some spell casting. So when it comes to the cantrips, there's only one that I think might fit, and that's Thunderclap. Think of this as doing a pretty massive butt slam, dealing up to 4d6 thunder damage to everything within 5 feet of you. Then when it comes to first level spells, we'll grab Absorb Elements, which you could think of as absorbing some power up. And then to enhance the idea that you're Jumpman, we'll grab the spell Jump, which means you have an insane jump distance because this spell makes it so you can jump 30 feet by just spending 10 feet of movement. And the fact that you can double that, thanks to your Monk Step of the Wind, makes it that much more powerful. But since Mario is definitely a game that a lot of people speedrun, we'll make you a little faster with the spell Long Strider, boosting your speed by another 10 feet. And then there's one iconic addition that I cannot avoid getting, because Mario very often has a pal to come along with him. And I'm not talking about Luigi. It's his trusted friend, Yoshi. At least when you're not completely sacrificing him to make it to the finish line. And to gain the assistance of Yoshi, we'll grab 2 spells to help with this. Beast Bond, to make a bond with a beast of some sort, and Animal Friendship. Then, since we have the cantrips and first level spells covered, let's go ahead and dive back through the Druid stuff, because at first level of Druid, you get access to a Primal Order. You can choose Warden for some extra access to weapons and armor, but we don't need that because that would ruin our monk stuff. So instead, we'll grab Magician, which gives us an extra Druid cantrip. And there's one extra way that we can use a Fire Flower by getting the spell Produce Flame. Just because I wanted one more way to do that, since a Fire Flower is one of the most iconic power-ups in all of Mario. So having that spell in D&D makes it so you can produce a flickering flame in your hand and you can throw it, dealing up to 4d8 fire damage. Then the other biggest reason I went with Druid, other than the rather fitting spells, is that most of the power-ups throughout Mario that aren't covered by basic elemental stuff all involve some sort of slight transformation into an animal. Especially if you're going with something like Super Mario Odyssey, where you're literally just throwing your hat on somebody and transferring your soul into them. But it's mostly making it so you can take on their general features. And we can recreate a lot of this with the 2nd level Druid feature, Wild Shape. So you can Wild Shape twice, and you can regain 1 use of this when you finish a short rest, or all of the uses when you finish a long rest. And you can turn into any type of beast with a maximum challenge rating of 1/4. But you can't do any beast that has a flying speed. But that doesn't matter because of your Monk Warrior of the Elements stuff. And very importantly, when you transform into any sort of beast from the Wild Shape feature, instead of taking on a whole bunch of new stats, you're only taking on mostly the physical stats. You still get to keep your wisdom, so that means you can still use your Monk Unarmored Defense. So if you're choosing any creature with a decent dexterity, your armor class is still going to be pretty solid. And also, ever since 2024, instead of taking on a new set of hit points, it now just gives you a bunch of temporary hit points equal to your level in Druid, which I know isn't a ton of temp HP, but considering in Mario you get hit once and you usually lose your power up, that makes sense. You can also use your Wild Shape feature for a Wild Companion to summon a creature, but it basically only allows you to use the Find Familiar spell. So you can use this to recreate Cappy, I guess, from Super Mario Odyssey. But I want to amp up all of the transformations and power-ups you might get in this way. So at 3rd level of Druid, I'm going to choose the Druid subclass, Circle of the Moon. This upgrades all of the transformation stuff. So now the challenge rating of any creature you turn into is now equal to your Druid level divided by 3. So you can now turn into a challenge rating 1 or lower. Your armor class, while in Wild Shape form, is also going to equal 13 plus your wisdom modifier by default, as long as it's not less than the beast's armor class otherwise. And the number of temporary hit points you get from shape-shifting now is 3 times your Druid level, so you actually have a decent buffer. Choosing this subclass also gives you Circle of the Moon spells. So you get the Cure Wounds spell, so you have a way to heal yourself. You get Moonbeam to blast somebody in another way, but I'm not sure quite how that would play into Mario specifically. But the last D&D cantrip you would get is Starry Wisp, which allows you to basically shoot some stars at somebody. And in Super Mario Galaxy, if you ever had somebody playing as the second player when you were just playing through, basically the only thing they could do was shoot little star bits at people, so I think it fits pretty well. Then also at 3rd level of Druid, you get access to 2nd level spells. So there's only 2 spells that are going to help us with Mario. One, we want another way to call upon Yoshi's help, so we'll grab Summon Beast, giving you a bestial spirit you can summon with a full stat block and everything. And then one more way to make sure we amp up our size with a mushroom with Enlarge Reduce. This also allows us to use the opposite mushroom that would allow us to shrink, which also allows us to play into certain levels that popped up in Mario 64 where things were really big or really small, but you can add this on top of your Giant's Might. So if you turn large thanks to Giant's Might from your Rune Knight stuff on your fighter, you can then cast Enlarge Reduce to make yourself from large to huge, which covers pretty much every power-up you could mostly think of for Mario, except for those like really specialized stuff like turning into a spring, but that's just making you extra bouncy, so the fact that you have the jump spell and enhanced jumping stuff from Monk, I think you're mostly well covered. Finally, at 4th level of Druid, you get access to 1 more ability score improvement, but since we're at 20th level, we can choose an epic boon. And since we already have tons of health, thanks to the boost from being a dwarf, we don't really rely too much on spell casting, so we don't need to enhance that. And we have so many attacks that boosting up our attack ability doesn't matter that much. Let's take a bit of a nod towards more speedrunners, since there's so many speedrunners for so many Mario games, and take the boon of speed. This allows us to boost one ability score by 1 point, which doesn't really matter because it's not going to help us since it will only give us odd numbers, but more importantly, it boosts our speed by 30 feet. So now we're really frickin' fast. That brings you to 20th level, which is max level in Dungeons & Dragons, and covering pretty much every major power-up in Super Mario. If you want access to the character sheet for this build or any of my other builds, feel free to check out my Patreon, linked in the description and the comments down below. And if you made it all the way to the end of this video, let me know by hitting that like button, and I'll be here hoping you roll at least 3 nat 20s in your next D&D session, especially if you want to say, it's a me, Mario, and play as Mario as a playable character in Dungeons & Dragons. Also, if you made it all the way to the end, you might be interested in one of these other videos that YouTube thinks that you might like, so feel free to click them. It helps my algorithm stuff. There's this one, or there's this one.